Hey, thanks for dropping by to the Planners on Purpose podcast, created by Naomi Tucker, CMP. Now, this space is for the event planners to encourage and empower you so that you can fully live your life on purpose. So before we dig in, please take a moment to subscribe so you get future shows. Now, here she comes, your host, Naomi.
Hi there, everyone. It's Naomi Tucker. Thank you all for tuning into this episode and the Planners on Purpose podcast. Today, I'm delighted to share with you a conversation that I had with Jordan Kentris, a guest on the Planners on Purpose podcast. Let me tell you a bit about Jordan. A user experience designer by trade, Jordan's background in art design isn't just professional. It's been a deep-seated passion for as long as he can remember. After years in the advertising industry, working in website design and user experience with major brands like Pepsi, Visa, Toyota, Mercedes, Jordan knew it was time he took his creativity offline so he could get his hands dirty. Out of that realization, he launched a custom brooch business, which ultimately evolved into a wedding stationery, perfectly marrying his experience in digital design with his love for crafting. Thus, his boutique design firm, A Good Day, was born to serve planners and their eclectic, one-of-a-kind stationery that establishes a unique brand for each event. From save the dates and invitations to day of signage and menus, Jordan draws inspiration from his diverse array of interests spanning fashion, architecture, interior design, and film to create an aesthetic that perfectly matches his client's vision for their celebration. Utilizing his extensive UX experience, Jordan also regularly works with creatives on digital projects to ensure they are capturing the very essence of their brand. Jordan was recently recognized by BizBash as one of the most innovative people in 2020 for his creative, holistic approach to virtual events. He was recently a finalist for the NACE One Awards Innovator of the Year 2020. Now, in our episode today, we are going to talk about turning criticism into something positive as a planner. Jordan has many tips for event planners to use if there is ever a situation where criticism is involved. And boy, we have seen our share of that. I'm excited to share this interview with you. With that said, I hope that you enjoy my conversation with Jordan. Jordan, welcome so much to the Planners on Purpose podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. I'm really, really excited to kind of share with the audience and just get to know and chat with you more.
Perfect. Yeah. I know we were talking earlier and you said that you're from Toronto. So I absolutely love that city, especially doing events in that city. So welcome from Toronto.
Well, thank you for the warm welcome.
Well, why don't we just start first about giving a brief overview for our listeners. Let us just know how you came to be in the industry and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of give a bit of the background. I started out actually in advertising. So I've been doing that for about 15 years on kind of consumer research, website structures, user behavior, some really kind of like heady, very critical, like mind way that I break things down. And I really miss working with my hands. And about 7 years ago, my brother was getting married. And I used to do a lot of crafting and kind of loved paper, loved art, painting when I was growing up, and wanted to kind of get back to working with my hands. And they were getting married. And I was like, hey, let me do your wedding invitations. First job ever. And it kind of like, I was bitten by the wedding bug, and I was like, I need to do more of this. I did theater and like production in high school, so I loved putting things on, and I wanted to be an architect and an interior designer. So I find events is like this really cool mishmash of those kind of really big things, but it's so temporary that it's really fun to kind of like create a space for a very short amount of time and transport guests. So I was like in love with that whole process. So dove in from there and launched my stationery business about 6 months after we did his wedding, because I was like, I need to do more of this. And the business has like evolved since then. So it's quite awesome.
That's cool. So what part of the stationery is it the creative process? What part of it do you enjoy the most that really gives you that passion for wanting to keep doing it?
I it's kind of twofold. So for me, the creative process is like where I find my like magic is. Like I'm an ideas person. I love research and kind of coming up with concepts.
Mhm.
But then I also love the like minutia of execution. I do a lot of like handmade details in my work. And so my husband's like, are you coming to bed? And I'm like gluing flowers at 3 a.m. And I'm like, no, I'm loving this. It's like, I don't understand. So like I find balance in both of those things. And for me, it's about, when someone gets something in the mail or they go to an event and they're like, I didn't even know this was possible. Like that's when I get like chills and I love that kind of element of creativity.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, shows like in the work that you do, but also in the event planning process. There's just this, I don't know, weird passion that we have that we're like, we want to do more of it. And sometimes it's just these little micro disruptions that happen. But
Yeah,
for some reason we just love it. Like bring it on.
I know. We're like a very special breed of humans, I find, where I don't know, there's just a level of dedication that I feel like a lot of us have to our clients and wanting to, create something that wasn't there before and give them the experience that they deserve and they want. And so I
Mhm.
feel like we're amazing at stepping up for that. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know why I stepped up to this after the fact, but I was like, I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think that it has changed, right, in the last couple of years because we're walking through a real tough time right now. And sometimes we're called to make those experiences a little bit just different. So right
Yeah.
now it's more virtual experiences, hybrid experience, gifting experiences. I don't know, talk about how like the last couple of years has affected yourself and your business and how you're operating these days.
I wouldn't have expected my business to look like it does now pre-pandemic. And to me, it's like amazing the trajectory that it's kind of taken. When everything happened, everyone knows everything literally ground to a halt. Events were canceled. All of my website, even my agency side of my work, like all of that got canceled because all clients were like, I'm not spending any money. Like we just don't feel comfortable doing anything because we don't know what's going on. So everything ground to a halt. And I was like, I literally don't know what to do with my life. So I was like, I don't have purpose anywhere. And slowly I kind of things started picking up on the website side and events. We were finding different ways of doing things, as you're kind of alluding to, with virtual and gifting and like, what can we do to keep these experiences going? And during that process, I've always kept my two businesses kind of separate. So my kind of UX consulting agency website side of my business has always been one side.
Okay.
And then it was just wedding stationery and event design over here. And through the pandemic, I've actually merged the two of them, so that it is one like forward facing company. And I'm offering those services that I do for, Fortune 500 companies to wedding professionals and event professionals, and how to understand your consumer and market to them, and website design and branding and all that really amazing stuff that I love to do over here is now being brought into the world of events. But I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't forced down, because I was like, we were going into, our business was like doubling every year pre-pandemic. It was
Oh,
amazing. We were like,
so you didn't
we were
have to do
growing.
anything.
No, I was quite happy with where I was
Mhm,
going, but I've also been able to like let the gas off a little bit on the stationary side in a good way,
mhm.
because I'm now able to be like, I want to work on those kind of jobs, and the other jobs I don't, and I'm happy to give them to people that succeed in those spaces.
Mhm.
So it's given me a lot of hindsight to realize where I want to be playing and doing and supporting businesses, but also being able to take on those amazing, fun, creative passion projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like that's where a lot of planners and managers in this field where they are right now. They have evolved a bit. And I have heard that where we're now have different solutions that we're offering to our clients, and it opens up a whole new world. It changes how we do business. And I guess for someone that's really trying to make those decisions with either their business or, with their lives, what would you suggest in terms of being a good piece of advice for them to do those little changes that are coming their way?
It's been really interesting to me because I had a lot of apprehension about it. My husband actually has been telling me for years, like, do this, do your UX work over here. And I was like, nah, I don't know how to wrap my head around it. And then I had a couple projects kind of come up that felt amazing and were not expected. And for me, it's been about understanding that that might be more of my calling in some of the aspects of what my skill set is, and listening to that voice. And, sometimes even if it is like, I don't really know if this is the right thing, but if the weird thing is, if the work is there
Mhm.
and it's happening organically and you're getting referrals or people are talking about it, that may be an area that you're like, oh, I
Mhm.
probably should look at this a little bit further
Right.
because something's working there that I may not realize.
Right.
So that to me has been really interesting to kind of like listen to that voice, so to speak,
Mhm.
just to like, you know, if I have people who are like, hey, I'm interested in your services, and I'm like, I don't really offer that service publicly, but I'm like, maybe I should.
Mhm.
And then you're like, okay, like let's see what this conversation is like. And for me, it's been about a lot of trial and error, and
Mhm.
and figuring out what is working and what isn't working and how to present that and package that and balance all the time that comes with trying to juggle so many hats.
Yeah, I mean, you said a key thing is really just like listening to your customer, right? And listening to your client in terms of like what they're needing, what they're wanting. And I feel like in the last couple of years, it was really important for people to listen to that, because there are clients that really wanted to meet and they wanted to meet now. But then there were other clients saying, hey, we need to hold off. We're not doing anything for 2 years, right? So really understanding the voice of the customer and putting forth solutions that's going to help them is so key. And it sounds like that's what you you have been doing too. So that's
I'm
great.
trying, yeah, it's great in the sense of like, I don't know, organic growth is kind of like this really weird magical thing sometimes where you're just like, okay, well, that's happening, so let's go see what's going on over there. But I mean, sometimes it's also like, for me, I've also like laid a stake in the ground being like, I want to accomplish these kind of things this year, even if the work isn't there. I'm going to put it out there to my community and to my peers
Sure.
and to my clients that I want to be doing that work.
Right.
And then those opportunities show up because they know that I'm looking for those things. And so that's been another shift as well,
Mhm.
in not being afraid to ask and not being afraid to be vocal in my aspirations.
True.
I'm
Yeah.
very driven in like what I want to be doing. And so for me, it's about within my community of peers who are supporting me, it's like letting them know that, this is where I'm going. Can you help me get there?
Yeah.
And then we all push each other towards those things, which is kind of an amazing thing to see over time. Like if you look back at, again, coming out of this conversation, like maybe in a year we do so many different things that because we are now connected, like those are the
Right.
things that you
True.
never really realize.
Yeah.
But it's all the things in the universe that start to line up that you're just like, oh, okay, let's just ride that wave.
That's amazing. I guess fast forward to, well, bringing us to present time. I know that a lot of clients or a lot of organizations, they probably have a good idea and things are going to start to be more in an endemic phase and start to move forward. What are you seeing more as some of the challenges that leaders like yourself are faced with right now that need solutions?
I think a lot of it is time. And it's not like the challenge is clients are ready and they're eager and they want to move fast. But we, especially as event professionals, we only have so much capacity. And when multiple people are coming back, and this is what really happened last year, especially when everyone was like, no, I'm getting married next month. And you're like, what do you mean you're getting married next month? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? We were all working like 80 hours a week, trying to like just hold our head above water to be like, I'm finally getting money, but this is not sustainable. So it's like having those conversations with clients to be realistic about their expectations, um, either having some tough conversations around level of investment, being like, sure, we can do what you're asking for, but you need to be prepared to pay a little bit more because, you know, florals are in short supply, paper's in short supply, your shipping is insane and unreliable. So you need to double your shipping costs. And even though we quoted this out, I'm doing my best to make these balances, but it's really about being honest and forthcoming and transparent with our clients of where we're at, because when we're like, no problem, I've got you, and we're you know, dying in the background, it doesn't do any of them justice. Because then when we go to pick up our next job, or we're going into an inquiry, or you know, any of those things, and we're late and we're slow, like that's impacting future business, because they're like, who is this person? I don't understand what they're trying to accomplish. When you're not able to give them the level of service they're looking for.
Yeah, I think, oh gosh, you said that was just so jam-packed. But it was awesome, because that's exactly what I think that everyone is experiencing right now. Things are coming in so hot and heavy. It's like you're, you know, drinking from the whole fire hole type thing. And we have to be realistic about what we can take on now. And I think for the first time probably ever, we are looking at a point where maybe we have to turn certain things away because it's going to take, you know, take too much time, or we don't have the resources because we're still trying to ramp up based off of what has happened. So that's something that is definitely a challenge right now. And I know a lot of leaders are going through it. And I'm so thankful that you're bringing that up. And meanwhile, you still have, let's say, that client that's like really pushing to get things done. So really, yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because we definitely need to balance that for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some clients can offer us a lot of grace and understand what's going on, especially if they're in an industry that isn't the same, but you know, is understanding the constraints of what's going on. But then there are those kind of clients that you're just like, we're maybe ultimately this isn't a fit, and how do I either step back from this or bring someone else in who can support me? And I think part of it's also just not being afraid to say no, especially now, because we need to make sure that we're safeguarding ourselves. Like the number of businesses that have closed or transformed and been severely impacted, especially in our industry, is heartbreaking. And like, we need to be able to try and start to rebuild and get more of us back into this, because the work is here. We know the work is here.
It's here
there's
now.
a massive, it's coming. We already know that. Like, I mean, some of my planner friends are like, I'm getting 2024 inquiries. And I'm like, well, you know, you're not taking those because that's insane. But like, people are trying to plan that far in advance because venues are booked. Like, especially here in Toronto, there's a relatively short supply of unique venues. There's a lot of really great spaces. But when you're looking for something that's a little bit different or a certain kind of capacity, there's like 3 or 4. And so those book up for our key weekends like 2 years in advance already. So you're just like, I don't know what to help you with. Like, how do we move forward collectively? If you're like, I have to get married on this date, and I'm like, how flexible are you on where you get married?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we're communicating to our clients as planners, and how we are able to have that conversation balanced in a way that they're able to accept it. Because I mean, the truth is that planners do get this criticism that comes from certain clients, and sometimes it can be really tough. And I think it's really that crossroads between what the planner is expected to do, but then also the expectation that's placed on the planner from the client. So I would love to hear your expertise in that area on how can we kind of manage those conversations in this world where we are so pressured.
Yeah, I feel for planners, because you guys are the middle people. Like, you're the conduit between all the vendors and the client and trying to translate that vision. And so you often are put in really awkward places sometimes where you're like, I'm I'm here to advocate for you and I'm doing the best I can to find everything in the way that you want and execute your vision, but sometimes I can't. And I think with the client, at least for me, it's about being human and letting them know, what you're working through and what you're actually doing in the background. So sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, but you're like, let's take the date, for example.
Mhm.
Okay, Susie Q, we're working through your date here. I've gone through 38 venues, and the earliest they like when you go through and you start quantifying the amount of work, I've spent 80 hours combing through whatever. Like if you can start to back some of those things up, and not like in a pressuring, like guilt trippy way, but more in the like, I've done my due diligence here and this is the best we can do.
Mhm.
And this is the options that are there. There's really not a lot they can push back on. Like, I mean, they may, but you can feel really confident in saying that, I've done quite literally everything I possibly could aside from building a venue and putting it up and being like, ta-da, this is perfect for you.
Right. That's so true. Key points, the humanness, be human, be transparent in the things that you're saying. I believe that to be true. You find that when you do have clients that know pretty much everything and you're open, you're honest, you're transparent, they're a little bit more accepting about the reality of where things stand versus those that just have no clue and there's some closeness there
Right.
between themselves and the planner. So definitely, really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I've started implementing on some of my clients is a bit of like a weekly status.
Mhm.
And it's more just like a quick email being like, hey, this week we worked on X, Y, Z, Y, whatever. Next week we're working towards these 3 goals. Just keeping you in the loop so that they're not in the dark. And I found that has built a lot of trust because they know things are happening in the background and they don't have to worry about certain things. And they're like, okay, great, that's amazing that you're accomplishing all of those things. Or, we're in active production, and they're like, great, I love knowing that things are happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and we talk on the podcast a lot about just accountability. So that's more like accountability within your meeting, having that
Yes.
weekly touch base to continue to touch base with your client, make sure everything is all set. So that's a good tip. Thank you. So what about when we're dealing with clients that might be harsh or rude, and some of them have been like more publicly demeaning.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot in our industry. And I know sometimes it's taboo. We don't, people don't want to talk about that. But I do feel like it's something in this whole age of mental health where that's kind of top, right, and center, making sure people are feeling good about themselves, making sure that people are taken care of is so key. But we do have to manage this criticism. What are some tips for that?
The challenge with criticism is a lot of people, myself included, at times are very emotionally attached to the thing that we're being criticized about. Mm-hmm. And so it may be our design, and maybe the way we communicate, and maybe our process, and maybe us as humans. Like that's where it gets really weird. But like I encourage people to like remove themselves from the situation and the emotion from the situation and look at the facts. True. And sometimes it's you did drop the ball, or you poorly communicated that, or a vendor you brought in wasn't able to fulfill the agreement, but you didn't have that line of sight. And so then it becomes a really easy conversation to be like, I hear you. I'm going to own that. I'm not going to own what happened, but I'm going to own the situation. And moving forward, we're going to move in this way. And I will work towards building that trust up again in there. Sometimes clients are just jerks, and you are just not going to be able to appease it. And you just have to, it's hard, mm-hmm. but you just have to accept that they're just being aggressive or whatever. And you can remove yourself from there. When we're getting hate online, that is quite scary to see. But the awesome part is you also likely, very much, very, very likely, have clients who love you, who can become your advocates. You can have vendor friends who can become your advocates. And when you have one bad review, it sucks. But when you have 48 great reviews and one bad reviews, people who are looking are still like, that's a weird outlier.
Right.
So even though we're like, I've got a terrible review, I'm now a 4.9 out of instead of 5, like it still sucks. But you have to look at the grand scheme of things, and that is literally a drop in the bucket. So like there are ways of kind of removing that aspect of hurt in there by actually just like it's not you. It really isn't you. It never will be you, because it's them. It's always like the criticism is always coming from someone else. It's something that they're going through. Oftentimes, especially with events, it's not necessarily the thing that you did. It's like, I'm stressed out because my mother-in-law and I are fighting about the budget, and you happen to do something that I was able to take that frustration out on.
Or they're getting pressure from the top, you know,
right.
too.
So there's a lot of times things that are so far out of our control, and trying to help them get to the rest of the meat of being like, okay, so let's see if we can unpack what happened here. Like, what did I do wrong? Is there anything that's going on with you that I might be able to help? Like, because sometimes it's, you know, we didn't have any transparency, and I'm like, well, I actually gave you as much as I possibly could. So is it that you weren't articulating what I was giving you to your parents who are paying for the wedding, and so they were completely blind? So is it a gap in communication? Is it a gap in process? Is it a gap in the way the contract was? Like, those are the things you can start to digest and then say, okay, you know, I heard you, I'm going to learn from this. And I've taken so many things away from these conversations, being like, we're going to add that clause to my contract, or we're going to add this step in my process, and now we're going to, like, because it's things that become proactive for other clients. It doesn't open ourselves up for that kind of feedback. So I mean, it's challenging for sure, but I don't know. I find that criticism in every aspect is an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a point where it becomes unhealthy, I guess, for the planner to be, you know, in an unhealthy situation? At what point, let's say, would you say a planner should draw a line?
I mean, if there's a few different instances, but like if it's getting to like slander and libel, like there's a point where you're, okay, this has moved past, you know, I made a mistake, you know, you made a mistake, let's kind of move past it. And when they're blatantly attacking you or dragging your name through all those things, there's a time where you have to just be like, okay, I'm going to stand for my business. I'm going to stand for myself. And it's not to say get combative. It's more just like, listen, like, this is where we are. It may be a let's terminate our relationship kind of conversation, which I think a lot of people are very scared of doing.
Yeah.
And you know, it's revenue we were expecting. It's a job that, like, but sometimes it's actually a lot healthier to kind of remove those toxic relationships because it's going to impact everything else. When you're dealing with trying to unpack a negative review and trying to do those things, it's detracting you from your family, your friends, your work, your clients, and who are going off and doing great things, and trying to balance those things is really tough. So when it's going on for really long periods of time, or clients who you're just like, I'm never going to make you happy, I might not be your person. And realizing that, because I know, at least for me at the very beginning of my industry, like everyone was my person, because you're just like, I don't know who my people are.
Yeah.
And you're like, and then you're like, never doing that job again. Like, and you just start to learn pretty immediately that, like, that's not a fit. And starting to realize what those red flags are, so that as you move out of these relationships and into new ones, being able to spot those things a lot earlier, to be like, okay, we're gonna fix what's going on here and prevent something that I have experienced in the past. Not to say it will happen, but you know, it's always smart to just start to trust your gut a little bit more, and really, hold, fast within your kind of needs and your goals and values for your business. And hopefully if things are becoming out of alignment, like what can you do to course correct those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think this is just amazing. Just thank you so much. Just giving those tips and just helping people get past some of those hard conversations, hard situations that they're in, learning how to say no. I love the take emotion out of it, stick to the facts, and really own the pieces where, let's say, you dropped the ball. So thank you so much for sharing those tips. Is there anything else or any other pieces of advice that you wanted to give our listeners when it comes to just challenge with that client planner relationship?
I've actually found, so I have a couple of accountability groups that I'm part of. And for me, that has been kind of monumental in the way that I approach my business, because I have a sounding board of community who is there to support me 100%. And there are often times where they'll come to me or the group with a challenge, being like, well, this is the situation. How do I react? How would you react? How would you do those things? Because they're non-biased. They're there to make sure that, we succeed as individuals within the group. And they're going to be like, hey, Jordan, you're actually in the wrong here. Because a lot of times we don't really realize it because we're in the weeds. Or, hey, Jordan, you are in the right. Your contract is in the right. They're in the wrong. And this is how I would address this. Or I've experienced this in the past. And for me, that's been amazing to have. And I didn't have that for a number of years, where a lot of us are very siloed in our businesses, and we're very insulated, and we're not part of communities to the same extent as, you would be in other industries. And it's getting better. And I feel like the pandemic has really opened up a lot of conversations. Like I remember when Clubhouse blew up, and I was like, we're having conversations that I've never been able to get a hold of these people, and I've wanted to hear them, and I've never been able to get an audience with them. And we're on equal stage, and we're able to have a conversation, and we're hearing thoughts and processes and things like that they're like, we're all peeking behind the curtain. And it was amazing that conversation was fostered through all of this. And for me, it's like, how do we keep those conversations going? It might be in micro communities, but it's about building those up and realizing that without those supports, even if they're competitors, I think it's actually valuable to have another planner in a group plus other kinds of vendors, because you guys work through the same problems. You work through the same processes. And then other vendors are like, I don't do it this way, but I do it this way, but I have similar problems. And you're like, oh, well, that's a really interesting way of handling that. I didn't even know, well, what's that platform? What's that CRM platform? What are you using? So you can start to understand different ways, because as a specific profession, I find that we can go down a rabbit hole of, well, as a planner, I use these kinds of software. I use these kinds of processes. I manage my business this way because that's what we're supposed to do as planners. But then sometimes you come across things and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. But what if I shifted the way it's working and I can tailor it to my business? And now I am not paying for 3 platforms, paying for 1. There are things within there there are efficiencies you didn't even know existed. So for me, it's really about having this group that I can rely on and know they have my back 100%, and I have theirs. That is just like an amazing feeling, feeling like I'm not alone. I'm not I don't know what to do, guys. And my husband's not in the industry, and I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, I don't know. Just do it.
I get that too.
He's like, come to bed on time. I don't know how to help you with that. So having people that can do that is key.
Yeah, I love accountability groups. I'm part of several myself, and even if it's in the organization or outside of it, being a part of member organizations, whether it's MPI, PCMA, and developing those relationships is just really key to keep the conversation going and spread the intention about the support and how we work through situations. So it's more of a standard. and we're not dealing with these crazy situations. So thank you. Thank you for that. I have just a few quick questions for
Sure.
you. And this is just, quick random questions. I thank you so much for being here. But sometimes for our listeners, we just like to know a little bit more about you. So I just have a couple of like quickies that I wanted to throw your way. Okay. So the first one is, what is your favorite thing to do on a Saturday afternoon?
Watch RuPaul's Drag Race.
Okay. My second question for you is, what would be your one book, if you had to share it with our team? What is one book that you would recommend?
The book is called The Art of Not Giving.
Oh, yes.
I love those kind of books that are just like, you know what? You do you. Like that kind of thing for me has given me a sense of confidence of owning what I want to be doing and those kind of directives within my business. So anything that can kind of just enable that is always really fun.
Yeah, so that is on my list, and I have to definitely get to that. It's gotten so many great reviews, so I can't wait to start reading it. My next question is, what is your most best piece of advice? And it can be life advice, it doesn't have to be event planning, but what was your favorite piece of advice that you've received?
A lot of people probably say this, but done is better than perfect. A lot of times we hold on to things because we don't feel it's ready for the world. But the thing is, even when it's perfect, it's never perfect because you start getting feedback and start testing it. And really a more agile, like test and learn approach of like, put something out there, do it once, get some feedback, and then iterate and do it again is kind of an amazing way of operating our businesses, because we're not like holding on to something for 3 or 4 years being like, I don't think I'm ready to launch this thing and I don't know what it looks like and I'm trying to solve it all. Like it's never like by the time you probably launch it, it's going to be different from what it was
right
in that instance. But like I always say it to my web clients of being like, well, my copy isn't perfect. And I'm like, the great thing with digital is literally you can go in and change it. And the person who visited an hour ago and the person who visits now will not know the difference that thing existed an hour ago. We're not in the world of print where I'm going to, print a business card and that's going to be my business card for the next 2 years. Like we don't live in that world anymore. We live in a world of social media and things like that, where I can make my brand one day blue and the next day green, and a client may not have never known it was blue. So like that's a really cool thing about just kind of getting it out there and that flexibility.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And my last question is, how did it feel to be nominated for the Biz Bash Most Innovative People in Events for 2020?
It was super, super, super like humbling, and just like being among that group of peers was amazing. Again, like the pandemic sprouted the things that got me that recognition. So I'm very grateful in some ways for what happened due to the pandemic, because it forced me to change the way I did business. And I think it's forced a lot of us to change the way we do business. And for me, being able to articulate that and be recognized for that was just like, was beyond.
No, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
To you. Well, that's all I had. Thank you just so much for joining me today. And I want to make sure to give everyone the opportunity to reach out to you if they wanted to connect. Why don't you go ahead and share your information with them and how to best get in touch with you?
Sure, would love that. So you can visit our website, agooddayinc.com. And in there, we've got all of our stuff for stationery, but as well as we're launching some business coaching, masterminds, courses in the future. So keep on post there, and there's some really cool stuff in there. And then Instagram is like my main social media. So A Good Day Inc. there as well.
Perfect. I'll make sure to link all of those in the description. And again, Jordan, this was such a great conversation. It was an important conversation. I just appreciated and enjoyed, and it was just a delight to talk with you. So thank you for coming. I appreciate your expertise and just all the value you brought today.
Thanks, Naomi. I've loved chatting with you.
I hope you enjoyed the interview with Jordan. It was certainly great to bring you so many tips for managing criticism. Thank you so much for joining the Planners on Purpose podcast. Until next time, stay on purpose.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, hit the like button and tell us how much you enjoyed the show by leaving a message in the comments. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.